This Sunday at 7:30 at the University of Manitoba's Eva Clare Hall, the Winnipeg Chamber Music Society will be presenting their fourth concert of this season. The concert will consist of music by Beethoven as well as music of Alfred Schnittke. Joining me here in the Classic 107 studios to tell us more about this Sunday's concert is pianist David Moroz from the Winnipeg Chamber Music Society. Welcome to our Classic 107 studios, I should say. Welcome back.
Well, thanks very much. It's always a pleasure to be here, Chris.
Oh, yeah. This concert this Sunday sounds just great. Music of Schnittke and Beethoven, but it's at a different location. It's at Eva Clare Hall at the University of Manitoba. When I think of the Winnipeg Chamber Music Society, I always think of the Muriel Richardson Auditorium at the Art Gallery. Why the venue change?
Well, in fact, the Muriel Richardson Auditorium has been our unofficial home, I think, for the past 33 years. We are playing at the Eva Clare Hall this month, because last year, when I was organizing concerts for this season, the Art Gallery actually was unavailable between January and June, because as everybody who's driven past there knows, the building construction there is massive. Yeah. And I think they had anticipated that at this time this year, there were going to be some issues. And so they weren't renting out the hall to anybody. So we scrambled around, not for too long, and found a beautiful place to play.
Nice, yeah. Okay, so there's two big works on the concert, the Schnittke and the Beethoven. I want to start with the Schnittke. What can you tell us about the Schnittke? Why? Why did you pick this piece?
Well, I've always been crazy about the music of Schnittke. I've been a little reluctant to program it on our concerts simply because some audience members find it a little bit challenging. But for me, this quintet is one of the great quintets of the 20th century. And I've only played it a handful of times, but every time has been an event, and I've really loved it.
One of the things that Schnittke is known for is what's known as polystylism. His belief was that he could combine serious music with more lighter music and put them in the same musical idea. There's elements of this in this quintet. I'm thinking about that second movement, right?
Well, the quintet, Schnittke's label of polystylism is wonderful because it means basically that you can write whatever you want, and that's what he did. The quintet overall is a very serious piece. I think the polystylism that you're referring to in the second movement anyway is that a little waltz drifts in. It's a nostalgic few minutes, and it's a little bit eerie, but really wonderful. And, he works his way through this piece, which Schnittke really worshipped the music of Shostakovich, and a lot of Shostakovich is very serious, and Schnittke certainly took that mantle over. And a lot of this quintet is serious, but the last movement of this quintet is heavenly. Everything resolves in such a transcendent way. That for me, it's the most remarkable feature of this piece.
The waltz that you're talking about in the second movement, I was listening to this morning, and it's a wonderful effect. The piano is playing a waltz, but it's up against this backdrop of sort of these tremolo strings. It's almost like you're listening to a waltz sort of with the strings being the curtain, and you're sort of in the background. That's
a good image, I think. It's a veiled reference to when waltzes were popular.
Mm-hmm. And possibly, the reason it's such a serious work is he wrote it just after the death of his mother, right?
That's exactly right.
And it's sort of written as a way to sort of memorialize her. And it is just it's a marvelous and very beautiful work. One of the other things I was reading about, and we were talking about a little bit of this off air, is there is this Bach motive in the second movement that is used by so many composers, this whole idea of B flat, A, C, B natural. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, it does. It's true. It drifts in and then it drifts out. I'm not so sure that it's a real important moment in the piece, but you can't miss it. Again, like Shostakovich, occasionally would quote his own initials within a symphony or within a chamber string quartet or something like that, and it's a very striking moment. Almost as if to say that he was there sort of watching over.
Right.
I'm not precisely certain what the Bach reference means.
Yeah. But it's interesting that it is there. I mean, so many composers have done it. One of the things when I was listening to it is it's in 5 movements, and the movements are somewhat contrasting, but the 5 movements are played without break, right?
It is. There are 5 continuous movements.
Yeah. It's just a really, really great work. The other big work on the program is the Beethoven Razumovsky Quartet No. 3. 2020 is the 250th anniversary of Beethoven's birth. Beethoven wrote 16 quartets. Why was this Razumovsky Quartet chosen for this concert?
Well, the third Razumovsky Quartet was the greatest quartet that Beethoven wrote up until that point. And we wanted to include it on a program this year, and we needed to balance it with something, and that's why actually the Schnittke appears in the first half of this concert. They're both monumental pieces, but very different from one another, but still very strong on their own. This quartet, I mean, it's a magnificent quartet. I love the nickname. I mean, Beethoven always has the greatest nicknames for his pieces, and, Razumovsky, it sounds like, it was named after some obscure character in a Tolstoy novel or something.
Right.
But in fact, Razumovsky was an ambassador. He was the Russian ambassador living in Vienna. And I guess at that time, ambassadors, they occupied a certain strata. And he was having a palace built for himself in Vienna. And he wanted to have some music to be played at the grand opening. So he commissioned Beethoven to write three string quartets. And I think he hinted at Beethoven to try to use some Russian themes. Yeah. Now, they're not precisely Russian themes. They may have a little Slavic influence, but Beethoven wrote what he wanted.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a little bit of that in the first and second, the 7th and 8th quartets, but this third one really doesn't have that. It's interesting that you're talking about this quartet being very different than the Schnittke, because I was thinking, whenever I think of the Razumovsky quartets by Beethoven, it's Beethoven for me in a good mood. I mean, all 3 of them are, it's very Beethoven, but it's not, I don't find the Razumovsky quartets particularly heavy. So there's this balance of the darkness of the Schnittke and this sort of lightness of the Razumovskys.
I guess that's right. Although I have to just emphasize that the Schnittke does end on a very upbeat, in a very upbeat way.
Right. One of the other things I found very interesting about these Razumovsky quartets, and by Razumovsky quartets, I'm talking about the 7th, 8th, and 9th. This is Beethoven 100%. I mean, his first 6 quartets are very much inspired by Haydn, right? But it's with these 7th, 8th, and 9th Razumovsky quartets where it's Beethoven full tilt, right?
Well, these are big pieces.
Yeah.
They're probably close to 3/4 of an hour each, and they're really symphonies for 4 people.
Mm-hmm. And he writes extremely virtuosically, in all 3 of the Razumovsky quartets. In particular, that rock and roll final movement to that C major quartet that you're going to be performing on Sunday.
The finale of this quartet is a great, great movement.
Yeah, it just goes lickety-split. David, I want to thank you so much for stopping by our Classic 107 studios and talking to us today. It's just been a real treat.
Thanks, Chris.
We're going to hear that rock and roll final movement to Beethoven's 9th quartet, the 3rd of the Razumovsky quartets. This is the one that's going to be performed this Sunday night. We'll hear the final movement performed by the Emerson Quartet.